get so mad, there's no controlling me. My thoughts get so bad, I'm like, I might grab a bat, I don't know. My wrath, my blood boils over like, oh God, here goes. I lost all feeling from my head to my toes. You said some shit that I can't let go, so just stay tuned for the rest of the show. So have you ever felt betrayed? Switches how you see things.
Good morning. All right. Finally got EV Mugs working the way I wanted to. Now I just need to, work through the rest of the internet. Let's get some shares out. Hopefully some people in. Deal with this backwoods interweb. Oh, is that a power hammer? Nice. Ooh. Hey, Mama Oakwill. Hello, Sherry. Give me a second to get a share out. Hopefully, Wintus and Mickey can take care of the rest for me because I only post onto one page. I'm not willing to fight with everyone and their mother just to get a share out. Anywho. God damn, this looks terrible on my screen. Anywho, how's everyone doing? Don't know if you can see it, but got a little bit rough on the face. Got a pretty bad sunburn and then hit myself some welding spall because I'm brilliant. And today we are talking about Ukraine because, well, some people had some questions. So, let's jump into this because Ukraine is a different monster altogether when it comes to the history and the politics thereof, especially today. How do I frame this? There's going to be a lot of bias in this. I can't help it. I'm not going to avoid it. I'm not going to try. And there's going to be some cold hard truths in there. So if you don't like, cold hard calculus and math and things that are really hard to swallow, I suggest you just leave the video. Don't watch this week's Trevor's Rant. Okay, it is what it is. Let's go ahead and close that window. And I understand if some people can't take that. It's fine. But to understand the whole of what's going on in Ukraine and why the United States is involved or shouldn't be involved, we have to go back to pre-World War One. Okay, pre-World War One, Ukraine was its own sovereign nation and it had very close ties to Russia. Post-World War One, the Bolsheviks, or communist, invaded in 1917. It became a puppet state of Russia. I think they called it the Ukrainian Socialist State Republic or something like that. And it, along with Belarus, who went through the same thing, and Russia, created the USSR, or the United Soviet State Republics. In that time, it was just a puppet state, and they were forced to farm. During the famine of 1937, majority of their food was transferred into Russia. So from the beginning, we can see that there has been a pattern of abuse toward Ukrainians from Russians. World War II happened, and Operation Barbarossa happened, where the Germans decided to go back on their treaty with Russia and invade. This was after they both became very great friends, invading Poland. The best way to have an alliance is through military adventurism, apparently. In that time, a lot of Ukrainians' opinions were split. Some absolutely loved the Wehrmacht, or German army. Some absolutely hated them. Some kept their alliance to Russia. Some kept new alliances. And the Germans that like the guy with the funny mustache. Sorry, I'm trying to avoid monetization issues here. You say the name or you allude to them too much or anything like that, you can get demonetized pretty quick. But I think you all understand what I say when I'm saying funny mustache man. Okay. Um, the Wehrmacht were hailed as liberators. Post World War II, it was consolidated into the greater whole of Russia. Um, they just made it part of Russia, much like Siberia is. It was just a different region of Russia. And it was split between agriculture and industry, where a majority of the industry from Russia happened, as well as arms production. It was also used as a buffer state between the communist bloc and the West. Okay. So they were used as workhorses. Come August 24th, 1991, Ukraine once again declared its independence. And come June 1st, 1994, the Budapest Memorandum happened. Budapest Memorandum is actually somewhat important because Ukraine was part of Russia and was a founding member of the USSR, and missiles didn't have as much range as they do now. ICBMs were a different thing. They mainly had IRBMs, or interregional or intermediate ballistic missiles. So a lot of those were stationed in Ukraine. When Ukraine became its own country, they took a lion's portion of the old Soviet stock and arms, nuclear weapons, and they even tried to tell a Soviet ship that they were now part of the Ukrainian Navy. The Soviet ship, the Russian ship, said no and floated off. So the Budapest Memorandum came about. The reason for this is as we should be. And new unstable governments and countries were thought to be not responsible enough to own nukes, which I think we all agree on, right? We don't want Alabama splitting off from the U.S. and keeping nukes, especially under new political turmoil. So we come to the Budapest Memorandum, and that was an agreement between the West, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and a few others. Oh, can I make this bigger? There we go, spotlight, bingo. To take the nukes out. We can skip that part for now. All right, according to the memoranda, Russia, the US, UK confirmed their recognition of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine becoming parties to the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and effectively removing all Soviet nuclear weapons from their soil, and that they agreed to the following. Respect the signatories' independence and sovereignty of their existing borders, in accordance with the principles of the CSCE Final Act. Refrain from the threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of the signatories to the memorandum, and undertake that none of their weapons will ever be used against these countries except in cases of self-defense or otherwise in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. In other words, the United States, Russia, UK, anyone that had signed the Non-Proliferation Act would never be able or be allowed to go to war or armed conflict against Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Belarus. They were also to refrain from economic coercion designed to subordinate to their own interest the exercise by Ukraine, the Republic of Belarus, or Kazakhstan of the rights, intent in its sovereignty, and thus secure advantages of any kind. In other words, put them into debt and then make them a puppet state. Number 4 is the big one that everyone keeps arguing about. Seek immediate Security Council action to provide assistance to the signatory if they should become a victim of an act of aggression or object of a threat of aggression in which nuclear weapons are used. If you guys have kept up with this since 2022, you'll know that Putin has very often threatened nukes. That is mainly what has kept the previous administration from escalating into Ukraine. Okay. Here's the thing. That is rather toothless. This has the same amount of bite to it as Flint Ethics and Accountability Board, because the UN Security Council is has 5 permanent seats: the U.S., UK, France, China, and Russia. And any one of those has veto right over any resolution put in front of them. Period. End of story. So, in 2014, when Crimea was invaded and annexed, in 2022, when Kiev was attacked, when the Donbass and Luhansk regions were attacked, resolutions were brought up to the UN Security Council from the United States in accordance with the Budapest Memorandum, Article 4. And Russia vetoed it. It makes zero sense. That's like going to Neely and saying, hey, the mayor's messing up. And Neely goes, and? It's the exact same thing. You can't have a criminal self-police. Number 5, not to use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear state party to the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, except in the case of an attack on themselves, their territories, or dependent territories, their armed forces, or their allies, such as a state in association or alliance with a nuclear weapons state. And then consult one another if questions arise during those communications. Okay. So, in theory, the Budapest Memorandum was to protect territorial sovereign interest. Ooh, what the hell? No connection. There we go. Territorial sovereign interest of Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, a few others. In practice, it is just a piece of paper and has all the power of a piece of paper. We still got more to go through. 2004 presidential elections. There was Viktor Yanukovych, who was a pro-socialist and Russian sympathizer. He wanted to become closer with Russia. Versus Viktor Yushchenko, who is pro-West. He wanted to become part of NATO. Viktor Yushchenko won, but Viktor Yana, the socialist, was appointed prime minister. So we had a pro-Western president and a pro-Russian prime minister. Caused a lot of problems all the way into parliament. Come, I believe it is 2004, the Orange Revolution happened that put more, it was a voting, it wasn't like revolution as we think about it, violence in the streets. I mean, yes, there were some riots, but it was more of a voting thing. More socialists came into power, and that is when a lot of corruption happened. I'm not saying the socialists were corrupt, I'm saying Ukraine in general is corrupt. It's been a thing for a while. It picked up a lot of its governance from old Russia. In old Russia, if you were put into some government positions, you weren't given a salary. It was expected that you would extort and receive bribes to make your way through. That was just the expectation, and Ukraine picked a lot of that up. Once Viktor Yushchenko came back into power, he basically dismissed part of parliament and dismissed part of the high court, their Supreme Court. Now, mind you, this is the pro-Western guy. This is a guy that wanted to become part of NATO. Hush, Lyra. Must be a package. Okay. So, up until that point, we have seen Ukraine not really knowing what's going on. It didn't know its own direction. It had several people pulling in different ways. Some wanted to be closer to Russia. Some wanted to be closer to the West. Some wanted to do their own thing. Lease a naval base from Crimea in Ukraine. The big thing for that is Russia being so far north, a lot of its naval ports freeze over during the winter. To them, warm water ports, as they call them, are extremely important. Crimean ports never froze, so Russians wanted a naval base that was operational year round. Ukraine denied to lease it to them. And March 18th, Russia decided to invade and annex Crimea. At the time, in 2014, all the way up until 2016, the Russians denied any of their military assets there. They said it was mainly militias or independent actors that wanted to be part of Russia. Uh, then recently, I believe it is 2018 to today now, Putin, President Vladimir Putin of Russia, admits Russian troops were there. This falls into gray zone warfare. The putting of non-state actors to do the state's will and bidding, basically mercenaries without the pay. Okay. Since Russia took over Crimea, some other non-state actors in the let me see my notes here. Okay, Donbass and Luhansk regions. Mind you, I don't speak Russian. I don't speak any of these languages. My Cyrillic sucks, okay? But we're going to try. The Donbass and Luhansk regions, several independence groups or groups who wanted to be closer with Russia, wanted to be part of Russia, took to terrorist actions. They started fighting the local Ukrainian National Guard and military. And the Ukrainian military reacted and started pushing troops into the area and were met by Russian military. Mind you, this was all in 2014. Okay. Russia instead decided to say, after the United States, the EU, and NATO stepped in and said, no fighting. Calm your tits. We have the Budapest memorandums here. You're going to back up. So Russia decided to unilaterally put in a referendum that the people will vote in 10 years whether they want to be part of Russia or Ukraine. It didn't even get to 10 years. I think it only lasted 6 or 7 years. Then they held the vote. There were a lot of questions around it, a lot of corruption alleged from both sides. And the vote came out pro-Russia. Ukraine denied this and said, no, this is still my territory, which led even further into hostilities and, just breakdown in communications between the two. This in 2020, 2021, when we started hearing on the news of complications between the two countries. There was a U.S. State Department memo saying, hey, don't go there, stay out of Ukraine. Ukraine, it has the possibility of being attacked at any time. Actually, I remember the day it happened in 2022, I was, for whatever reason, watching the UN. I never watched the UN. I find it boring. I find it pedantic. I hate the UN. It thinks it's a world government when it's just a bunch of people together and do nothing. But I was watching it. And the speaker for Ukraine, the Ukrainian ambassador, got the notice while he was speaking on the floor that Russia had invaded his country. So that is where we went there. Let me catch up with some questions here. Sorry, I had to go through old history here. All right, since the invasions of Ukraine by Russia, the wisdom of Ukraine relinquishing its nuclear weapons has been questioned. Yes. And given the toothlessness of the Budapest Memorandum, as there was no actual hardcore solidifying security assurances, I can promise you no other country now will ever give up its nukes. It's just fact. Russia breached the Budapest Memorandum with its annexation of Ukraine's Crimea. Yes. And then 2014, the US and UK provided Ukraine with financial and military assistance and imposed economic sanctions on Russia. Yes, all true. One thing to follow up on that is in 2014, when Ukraine was first fighting Russia, they were still using old Russian tactics, rather outdated Cold War thought processes. And they got their asses kicked. There's no way around saying that. They were getting shreked pretty bad. After calmed down, NATO, United States, UK, France started bringing in Ukrainians and sending in their own advisors to Ukraine and teaching them how to fight like a Western army. And you can see from 2022 onward the effectiveness of this. Instead of meeting a far larger army, better equipped for the most part, in open battle, they went asymmetrical. They decided that if Ukrainians were going to die, they were going to die with a kill ratio. In other words, I drop 2 or 3 and then I can go. And it has done wonders for them. But now we have to come back to the politics. Okay. Man, where do I start with this one? Yes, this is what, or is this what we were doing? Russia should not have attacked them. Agreed. But I just wanted to point out that Western tactics were superior to Russian tactics just because, number one, I have my prejudice. I do not like Russia. I do not like them at all. I have no love for Russia. Okay? I'm violently pro-American. Any damage to Russia helps America on the world stage. That doesn't mean I necessarily happen to have love for Ukraine either. We have to remember that whether it was legal or not, whether it is right or not, we're not going to dig into that because there hasn't been a big investigation into it. Ooh, are you having problems with your volume? Let me turn up my little volume knob here. Nope, that's all the way up. And let me check my settings here and see if I can fix that. It's about as loud as it goes. Do you just need me to speak up? Anyway, there was a company called Burisma. It was a that sounded beautiful. It was or is a Ukrainian-owned oil and gas company. And Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, was on the board, even though he had no experience with any of that field, which prompted allegations of corruption. Okay. I'm not saying it was corrupt. I'm not saying it wasn't. While we might be doing investigative journalism in Flint, I'm not doing this on the global scale, okay? We're just saying what it is. After Ukraine, or the Ukrainian people, removed their old government and put in a new one, which happened to elect Zelensky, there was an investigation into Burisma. Joe Biden, then vice president, told Ukraine, either fire your inspector general who is investigating Burisma or you will not receive any aid. The man was fired. When, in 2016, Trump came in, he cut off aid for allegations of corruption. And he was impeached for that. That was his first impeachment in 2016. It was over Ukraine and aid. I don't think all of it was military aid. I think some of it was, itchy nose, civilian aid, infrastructural aid, things like that. Money to their government to help them build. It was eventually released to them, and they received it. Okay. So right there's been three big things of corruption already. Then we have to talk about another part. And now that it has been 25 minutes, I can actually start saying some actual words here. Ukraine also had a problem with Nazis, and that harkens back all the way to World War II when the Wehrmacht went through Ukraine, and many of the Ukrainian people saw them as liberators. No, but we're going through some things like giving an entire reason as to why the U.S. is or is not giving aid to Ukraine. Is this what we're doing? Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. So, one group that was fighting for Ukraine against Russian backed fighting groups in the Luhansk and Donbass was the Azov Brigade, named after the Sea of Azov. They had several. They were avowed Nazis, right? There's no way about it. Neo Nazis. They took pride in that name, and that isn't propaganda. That is well confirmed fact. You can go look through it. If you just type in Ukrainian Nazis, Azov Brigade comes up top. And that is not a reason for Russia to invade at all. But it is one of the. All right, it is not a legitimate reason for Russia to invade at all. Okay. It is one of the reasons that Putin cited for his 3-day special operation to, quote, denazify Ukraine. But what someone does in their own country should be no other country's interest, especially when, I mean, let's face it, you're trying to steal a chunk of their territory. Okay? Like, once again, I have no love for Russians. I honestly don't think that they belong in Ukraine. I don't think that they should be trying to take any part of Ukraine. I don't think that any deal with Russia to stop the fighting should Ukraine surrender any territory. However, I also don't find it to be our business. And here's why. Cold hard fact. The more Russia and Ukraine fight each other, the more damaged Russia is. It just is what it is. Any hurt on Russia helps the U.S. Russia, as part of BRICS, has been trying to replace the United States reserve currency with their own currencies. Either the Chinese, I believe, yuan, Russian ruble, the Indian rupee. I don't know what South Africa uses, and I don't know what Brazil uses. But has been trying to replace the world reserve currency to one of those, which would hurt the U.S. economy. Russia has also been trying to exert power over Europe. They are a regional power. I have to give that to them at very least. But they miss being a world power. They miss being a superpower. They are not either now. They can only project power through politics, economy, military, and culture within a close sphere. They want to be able to grow that out, which would eat into the United States power and all that. So any damage to Russia done by Ukraine helps us. Helping Ukraine win the war, though, does not. Because if Russia decides to back off, stand down, then they get a chance to rebuild. Whereas if it comes to a slow boil, a simmer, then the more Russia gets eaten up, the better we are. And it's a cold hard fact. Is it moral? No. But at the same time, I've said this several times, I've even told Mickey this, you have to take morals out of politics when it comes to geopolitics. Because the right thing is hardly ever the thing that is done. Okay. It's just a fact. I mean, the right thing would be everyone respects everyone else's borders, everyone respects everyone. No one, has a reason to go to war with each other. There is no right thing when it comes to politics, especially on a global scale. It is what you can do for yourself, what others can do for you, what you can trade with others to get something done for you. So, yeah, it's a harsh truth. Now, there has been rumors out there, and these rumors are unfounded and unbased. I think it started with Tucker Carlson, so, no evidence whatsoever. I'm not a fan of Tucker, obviously, right? He has said that Ukraine was selling weapons that the United States gave them to Mexico, of all places. The United States was not giving small arms, and I don't see Mexico with any, surface-to-air missiles or, uh, long-range ballistic missiles or tanks. I don't see the Mexican cartels with that. So, that's just. I think Tucker Carlson is a Russian shill. I mean, he sat there and licked Putin's feet during an interview. It was absolutely disgusting. I just. There's really no good way here. We either fund Ukraine to our own detriment. Bye. Have fun. Anyway, we either fund Ukraine to our own detriment in terms of money, because while we've been giving the military aid is kind of the same way that aid came into Flint. And hear me out here. So when Flint received X amount of money for replacing the pipes and infrastructure, it wasn't actual cash that came in. It was, pipes or used equipment, and they attached a dollar sign to that. When we gave Ukraine, say, the Bradleys that I've gone over before, we just gave them the Bradleys straight out and said, well, that comes out of X amount. And we're saying we gave this to you, or we gave this much money to you when it's just the vehicle. That's how our military aid's been going there. But a lot of civil infrastructure aid has also gone to Ukraine. We've propped up their government. We've been paying their government salaries. We've been paying their first responder salaries. That actually does come out of our pockets. The money that has gone to prop up a failing country in the middle of a war has done very little for us at all. And once again, you can't just look at what's right. You have to look at what things can do for you. Because if you're constantly doing what's right on a global scale, then you put yourself last. We've been doing that for far too long. The amount of money that we've spent on Ukraine and their government, not in terms of weapons, but just their government, could have been spent elsewhere in the United States for far better returns. Quality of life improvements for Americans countrywide. All 50 states, including like Alaska. Unfortunately, we decided to throw money at Ukraine. It's been in several of our infrastructure bills. It was in the ARPA Act, American Rescue Plan Act. That money goes to Ukraine. The border bill that Trump supporters shot down had money going to Ukraine. Everything was about sending money in one way or another to Ukraine for the past 3 years. It doesn't really do anything for us, especially just straight up cash payments. I mean, we were doing straight up cash payments to countries like Iran for the longest while, even though they absolutely hated us. Straight up cash payments to North Korea whenever they'd throw a hissy fit. Things that could have been done at home were skipped over. In terms of modernization, our military is 2 decades behind where it should be because we fought pointless wars in the Middle East for 2 decades. We have better things to be doing than supporting other people right now, especially because no other country is paying us to upgrade our stuff, even though we are the world police. Europe has been begging us to send more money and more support to Ukraine, yet they refuse to do it themselves. When it comes to terms of GDP, like 3 countries beat us in percentage of GDP sent to Ukraine. Okay, that's cool. That's fine. But when you actually put a true dollar amount on it, the U.S. is ahead by far. The U.S. has spent more on Ukraine than all of Europe, even though this is a European problem. And then, to add insult to injury, even though we slapped Russia with so many sanctions that it's basically become a third world country, they're still making money. Why? Because Europe keeps on buying gas and fuel from Russia, offsetting any aid that they've sent Ukraine and then putting it into the negative. This them buying fuel, gas, natural gas, everything from Russia is funding their war. So then why should we be trying to offset what Europe is doing to itself? I mean, if Europe is feeding into a vending machine and not getting any candy out, why should we have to go up with the sledgehammer? I'm sorry, I care more about, this is what we're doing. I care more about Deborah Luna. I care more about Mama Aquil. I care more about Miss Cheryl Sunray than I do about Europeans. I'm sorry, when it comes on down to it, at the end of the day, I'm always going to be for my countrymen first. And the way this government has been run since, God, 2008, 2004, hell, 2000. Let's just go all the way back to when I was a kid with Bill Clinton. It has always been other people first. We have been ahead of everyone else. When the Soviet Union fell apart, the USS fell apart, Europe spent what they called the peace dividends. In other words, the money that they had agreed to spend on their own militaries, their own defense budgets, on social programs such as Medicare for all, such as free college, everything like that, and then still expected us to protect them. Do you know how many military bases we have in Europe? We've got more military bases in Europe than we do on our own country. And that's Army, Navy, Air Force. I don't think the Marines have a base there, but they just kind of tack along with the Navy any blessed way. We have an entire airborne brigade stationed in Italy. We have one of the largest bases in the world, Ramstein, in Germany. Why? If you take a look at the overall GDP, let's see, right there, Deborah Luna, and Turkey is a NATO ally. But if you take a look around overall GDP, we spend about 5% of ours on our military. Other NATO countries, such as Canada, 1.25%. I mean, hell, before 2023, I think only 6 countries in all of NATO out of 30-something were spending over 2%, like we all agreed on in the 1950s. Spain has a total of 63,000 soldiers total, period, end of day, all branches. England has let its navy atrophy into a vestigial organ. They barely have several operational nuclear submarines, let alone a surface fleet. The only real countries that I rate when it comes to military expenditure and actually having a military worth anything would be France. And I know that's funny because I make fun of France for being surrender monkeys all the time. But France, because after World War II and the embarrassment of it, they've reformed their military into something absolutely spectacular, and they spend their 2%. The Nordic countries, 2 of which just joined and decided to go 2% right out the bat, right out the gate. Latvia, which is where I got this shirt. A Latvian soldier came to Michigan for Operation Northern Strike to train with Americans, and I traded him for this shirt. They spend a large chunk. The Baltic countries with Latvia put 2% in, and then Poland. Every other country in NATO spent less than 2% for decades. They are behind. They expected us to do it. And now that a problem is finally kicked off in Europe because their own weakness and the United States remote, being so far away, now they want us to go over there and help. When, damn, if we weren't having to babysit their asses, maybe we could have had better quality of life things here, such as cheaper college, such as cheaper healthcare. Instead, we were having to subsidize these countries' defense. There are very few countries that I actually care about on the world stage, and that's only because they do something for us Americans. And I know that's harsh, and I know that's being selfish. But when you're looking at the global stage, you really do have to drop your ethics and morals. One of the countries I actually care about is Taiwan. Why? Because superconductors. Oh, and they're investing a couple billion here to have super semiconductors built in the United States. So if anything happens to them, China doesn't get a global monopoly. Okay. I do care a bit about the Middle East. Why? OPEC. It's what keeps our country running. It's what keeps the majority of the world running. Most everything else kind of just falls by the wayside because no one else is willing to either nut up and pay or at least give us reciprocal actions. We protect you and our interest, and then you make sure that our interests are met, or they don't protect themselves. And it's just a hard truth, a hard fact reality. So many countries have gotten used to the United States being the world police and going out and stopping X, Y, and Z. But we also got shit talked, and I do mean literal shit talked, for decades. Oh, America the warmongers, America this, America that. But then you want us to go to war now? You want us to send our young men and women now to go die for a country that honestly doesn't care about us except for what we can do for them? I mean, cool. They're taking the same approach I am. But what am I getting out of it? Why should I send my little brothers and sisters in the U.S. Army now, you know, the generations that came after me, to go fight someone else's war? Well, we weaken Russia. Terrific. We weaken ourselves. We also take a possible advance toward a larger war. And if we put too much attention on Europe, then China takes Taiwan, which we need. And I know it's harsh, and I know a lot of people are angry about it. At the same time, prior to the election, we were also all saying, why is money going all over the world? Why is none of the money coming here? Why is Flint still a disaster after 11 years when we can afford to send billions around the world? Why do some places, some cities look like they are from a third world while being in the United States? Why do some neighborhoods have a mortality rate higher than war zones? Why aren't we fixing ourselves, but we're trying to pay off the rest of the world to fix it? It's come to a harsh reality. It's us and take care of ourselves, or we drown trying to save everyone else. And I'm sorry, but no one else is important enough to me to care about them more than I care about my own countrymen. I don't care if I've never met you. I don't care if you absolutely fucking hate me. If you're from America, I like you more, just default boilerplate base, than I do someone from another country. I really don't care your religion. I don't care your skin color. I don't care what party you vote for. I like you more than I like someone, say, from Romania. I care about you more than I care about someone from, say, Poland. Because we have to take care of ourselves first. We tried doing the world police, sending our forces all over the world, trying to put out these brush fires. The United States has something like over 150 bases worldwide. Did you know last year there were over 53 armed conflicts involving 93 different countries? And the United States had been partially involved in at least 23 of them, including conflicts in the middle of Africa that you don't hear about because it's not glamorous news, or because we're just always everywhere. When are we going to stop? Why do we have to have a military that is so bloated? The U.S. Army itself is over 1 million personnel. We are congressionally mandated to have 11 aircraft carriers. We have 7 numbered fleets to patrol and secure 7 different parts of the oceans worldwide to protect global shipping and trading. And no one else is even trying to help with that. And none of these other countries who are benefiting off of it are even appreciative. When are we going to start taking care of ourselves? See, the thing is, in 2022, the rare earths deposit that Trump is now negotiating with Zelensky for was found. And it is my personal belief that's why Russia invaded. That and for oil. They tried doing an American-style attack, a decapitation strike into Kyiv, and they screwed up bad. And it devolved into this World War I style trench warfare, no one's moving anywhere. Well, we aren't getting anything out of it. And even if this rare earths deal goes through, a lot of that is controlled by Russia now. So then we would have to come in and fight with Ukraine to get that back, or in the peace negotiations, have Russia give that up to Ukraine, which I highly doubt they will. Honestly, I hate the idea of President Trump going out and trying to negotiate a peace agreement here. And it isn't because I want people to die, X, Y, and Z. I mean, granted, hurts Russia. I like it. It's we have no dog in the fight. And honestly, if those two are going to fight, they're going to do whether we say they can or not. And if we do give them, say, a peace, within a decade it'd be back again because Russia and Ukraine have neither secured their political or strategic objectives. Those are left undone. They're just going to rebuild their militaries and go back at it. Did BlackRock really buy the Panama Canal? That one I don't know. That one would actually disturb me. Yes. Strikes a $23 billion deal to place Panama Canal ports, only the ports, under American control. Let's see if that has gone through. Has agreed to sell shares of its units that operate the ports to a consortium including BlackRock Inc. after President Trump alleged Chinese interference with the operations. In a press release, CK Hutchison Holdings said Tuesday that it will sell all shares in Hutchison Port Holdings and all shares in Hutchison Port Group Holdings in a deal valued at $22.8 billion. So yes, a group including BlackRock is buying a large portion of the Panama Canal ports. That's something that benefits us. I mean, also at the same point, previously we were paying higher prices than the rest of the world to use the Panama Canal just because they assumed that we were richer. I don't know about them. I don't know about you, but if I look at my bank account, I don't see anything rich about me at all. Just a fact. Just because the United States has a high GDP doesn't mean that it's not all being spent. Hell, we are spending more than we make a year. We are in an upside down deficit and it has to be corrected. Part of that is withdrawing a lot of our foreign aid and support for countries that would fail without us. I mean, does it suck? Yes. Does something better hopefully come from it? Hopefully. At the end of the day, though, let's take a look at some of the cities around our country that are looking just like some of these. Hey, No Name. How you doing, buddy? But seriously. I mean, hell, Lake City, just down the road from me. I got lost using GPS and I found myself in a part of town where I would have felt comfortable in 2009 with my body armor and helmet. If we take a look, just look at ABC News, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whichever, and they'll show you daily some cities in America that are falling apart with high violence. Why are we worried about other parts of the world when this is happening to our own brothers and sisters here? Why do we care about what's going on in backwardsistan? We'll just, place that right next to Kazakhstan, right? Why are we worried about that and not worried about what's going on in Chicago? or Cleveland or Austin or Houston or Sacramento or LA or hell, one of the Carolinas is on fire now. No, Deborah, because you're the one that brought that up to me, so I can look it up and then talk about it next week. I'll come back to you with a lot more details than just me reading an article to you. But it seems that we are focused more on making everyone else in the world stable and happy when we are unstable and unhappy here. Infant mortality has gone up in the United States for the first time in ever. Our actual IQs going across generations is going down. This isn't just a Flint problem. This is an American problem. The next generation is proving to be dumber as a whole, as an average, than the last generation. And honestly, if you take a look at it going from my generation, Gen Millennial, dumber than Gen X and Gen W, baby boomers. We have so many problems here that we have to correct first and foremost before we start looking back out at the rest of the world. And I get it. Some people clench their ass cheeks when they hear it because every time the United States has gone into isolationism, there's been a world war. I think at this point it's unavoidable, and we might as well be in the best position possible. I don't think I'm wrong here. Like I said, I feel for Ukraine. Ukraine has been abused and used for decades, almost a century under Russia. At the same time, I don't see how it's my problem. I don't see how it's No Name's problem. I don't see how it's Deborah's problem. I see how it's Ukraine's problem. I see how it's Europe's problem. And maybe Europe can cut back on their energy consumption from Russia. Hell, you know what? We're beefing with Canada right now, and I'll still say, hey, Europe, go buy your damned gas from Canada. Stop paying the people to shoot at people that you're paying to try to shoot back. You're playing both sides on a losing bet here. It's stupidity. That's the problem. Like, they can't figure themselves out. We are a country, and we can only think for ourselves, and it gets really hard when others expect us to think for them. We threw sanctions on everything Russia does, and then our own allies are circumventing that. We tried. You want to fuck it up, your problem now. And Russia's, at first it was to denazify Ukraine. Okay, well, yeah, there are those there. I don't see how it's Russia's problem. Then they said it was because NATO is encroaching. Okay, yes, I get it. Under the Budapest Memorandum, NATO is not to go any further east. At the same time, you can't really dictate another group's freedom of association. That's like telling No Name here not to associate with me, and then he still talks to me, so Deborah goes and knocks him out. That sounds pretty jacked up, don't it? But at the same time, it didn't affect me. It affects Germany. It affects Poland. It affects England. It affects France. It affects Greece, Turkey, the Nordic states, the Baltic states. We've got 2 oceans between us and Russia. So why aren't they taking care of it? Why is it that they're relying on American F-16s, American M1 Abrams, American Bradleys? Why are they relying on American ATACMS for the HIMARS? Why aren't they giving their own? Because if Russia decided to push on past Ukraine and go into now these other states, now it's their problem. So they think holding on to the weapons helps them, except if Russia gets stopped, then it's not a problem. So why aren't they pushing all the material they can into Ukraine as fast as they can? It's not like they need Papa America's permission unless they're using a weapons system that was developed in the United States and needs our permission. But so many of these countries have their own homegrown systems that they can just donate those without us giving a nod. So why does it all fall onto us? I'm sorry. It's a harsh reality, but they're going to have to learn to stand up for themselves. They're going to have to learn to spend their own money instead of spending ours. They're going to have to learn to triage decisions instead of asking us to do it for them. Because if you ask us to do it for you, then you're basically our territory. And at that time, you need to just start shutting up and doing what we say. If you're going to sit there and ask us to do everything for you, but then still have an attitude after, you can go fuck yourself. I really don't give a rat's ass. And why all this concentration on Ukraine when, like I said, last year there were 50 plus armed conflicts around the world. We took interest in two. We took interest in Ukraine and Palestine. What about the others? Why aren't we trying to mobilize and go save them? What makes these two so important? What makes the others less important? How do you decide whose life is worth more or worth U.S. attention and who isn't? Look, if you can't do them all, then you can do none. That's just the simple fact of it. But that has been the rundown of it. I know, is this what we're doing is upset, and sorry, I told you, if you can't take the callousness and the coldness of it, you might want to tune out and, but at some point we have to take care of ourselves. I'm not going to go put out my neighbor's house while it's on fire while mine is burning to a crisp at the same time. I'm not going to go clean up my neighbor's house when mine is a filthy wreck. We have too many problems here. Hell, we have kids getting shot by cops here. Don't you think that could use some extra time and money and attention to start sorting this problem out? Why aren't we paying attention to that, but we're paying attention to other countries' wars like they're a sports event? It's a harsh reality, and we have to live in it, so we might as well act like it. Some places will always be, and I do mean always be, unstable, no matter how much we intervene. Some places will always have a thumb pressed on them, even if it isn't ours. So why go over there and remove one thumb for 3 more to press on them? I know the world is, everyone wants it to be this big happy place where everyone gets along and everything is sunshine and no one fights and no one argues and, equality all around. Unfortunately, some other countries and some other cultures don't see it that way, and we can't really go and fix that unless we bomb them into oblivion and into extinction, which I don't think we should be doing. Okay, I mean, it's just a sad fact of reality. I think at first, if only, we need to make sure that those same ideals that we espouse the world should follow are actually followed at home. We need to re-realize the American dream and make sure that any and every American who has come here legally or who has been born here can actually reach out and attain that. It's not our place to make sure that the American dream is attainable for some dude off in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia can take care of Yugoslavia. America needs to take care of America. Anyway, guys, I think Mr. Elliott comes on this weekend. Stay tuned for Monday's morning bump with Mickey and Wintus. Also, a shout out because we got a new segment on the morning bump, Thursdays with the King. And then Tuesday, we've got Justice Unlocked with Ms. Jewel. And finally, since they said her name this morning, I feel comfortable saying it. Sister Taliba from our 810 chat has her show coming on. We've got a few more things to iron out, but it is coming down the pipeline. So stay tuned. keep informed, and you guys have a wonderful day.